My name is Arturo, and my only son, the boy I gave my life to, emptied my pension account and left me with nothing but the dust in my pockets. He stole the money I needed for my heart medicine, the money my wife Elena and I saved for 40 years, peso by peso. He looked me in the eye, figuratively, over the phone, and told me I was already as good as dead, a sad, old piece of furniture taking up space in the house where he grew up. What would you do in my place? Listen to my story until the end, and tell me what would you have done. And please, let me know from which city in Mexico you're listening. I need to know I'm not alone in this. If you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe to the channel. It all happened on a Tuesday, one of those scorching May afternoons in Querétaro, where the sun beats down on the cobblestones and makes the air shimmer. I was walking to the Farmacia Guadalajara on the corner, the same walk I've taken 1,000 times. I needed to refill my prescription for losartan, the little pills that keep my blood pressure from blowing the top of my head off. I remember feeling content, even a little proud. At 80 years old, I could still get around on my own, still handle my own affairs. I greeted Don Chencho at his newspaper stand and waved at the kids playing soccer in the street. It was a day like any other, quiet and predictable. I had no idea that in 10 minutes, the ground beneath my feet was about to crumble, that the sun I raised was about to treat me like a stranger, like a nuisance. Inside the pharmacy, the air conditioning was a blessing. I waited my turn, smiling at the young woman behind the counter. She knows me. "Don Arturo, the usual?" she asked, already grabbing the box of medicine. I nodded, pulling my wallet from my back pocket. It was a simple transaction I'd done every month since Elena passed. I slid my debit card, the one from my pension account, into the machine. A sharp, ugly beep filled the quiet store. "Fondos insuficientes," the little screen read. "Insufficient funds." I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. "That can't be right, Mija," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The pension was just deposited last week. Please try it again." She did, with a look of pity that felt worse than an accusation. The same angry beep, the same shameful words. I was standing there, a few people in line behind me, unable to pay the 300 pesos for the medicine that keeps me alive. The walk home felt like a pilgrimage of shame. Every step was heavy, my legs like lead. The sun I barely noticed before now felt like it was trying to cook me alive. The cheerful sounds of the neighborhood were gone, replaced by a roaring in my ears. Insufficient funds? How? The account had over 80,000 pesos, my life savings, the buffer Elena and I built for emergencies. I gave my son Marco a copy of the card years ago. "Just in case, Appa," he'd said. "In case you get sick and I need to pay for a doctor or something." I trusted him. He was my boy, my only child, the one I worked double shifts for at the factory, sacrificing my back and my hands so he could go to university and have a life better than mine, a life without calluses and grease under his fingernails. As I fumbled for my house keys, a cold, sickening certainty began to settle in my gut. I sat at the small kitchen table, the one where Elena used to serve me coffee, and my hands trembled as I dialed Marco's number. He answered on the third ring, his voice impatient, like I was interrupting something important. "What's up, Papa?" I tried to sound calm. I asked him if he knew anything about the bank account, if maybe there was a mistake. There was a pause. A cold, deliberate silence that stretched for an eternity. Then he said the words that ripped my world apart. "I needed it, Dad," he said, his tone flat, without a trace of shame. "You don't need that money anymore. You just sit in that old house all day. I have a family, real bills to pay. Consider it an advance on my inheritance." Before I could even breathe, before I could respond, he hung up. The dial tone buzzed in my ear, the cruelest sound I had ever heard. The theft wasn't just the money. It was his words. It was the realization that, to my own son, I was no longer a father. I was just an inheritance, waiting to be collected. My life didn't begin with this emptiness, with this gaping hole in my chest where a son's love should be. It began on a small rancho, a speck of dust on the map somewhere between Querétaro and San Luis Potosi. We had nothing but the dirt under our fingernails and the sun on our backs. My father taught me to work the land from the moment I could walk, and my mother taught me that dignity wasn't in what you owned, but in the honesty of your labor. We ate what we grew, and our only luxury was the rain. I remember looking at my father's hands, cracked and hard as stone, and thinking there had to be something more, a life where hard work didn't just mean survival, but a chance to build something that would last. That dream wasn't for me, I knew, but for the family I hoped to have one day. When I turned 18, I packed a small bag with 2 changes of clothes and took a bus to the city of Querétaro. The noise, the people, the sheer size of it all was overwhelming. I found a job at a metal fabrication plant, a place of fire and screaming steel. It was grueling work, welding frames for hours on end until my eyes burned and my back ached with a fire of its own. But it was a steady wage, a real paycheck every week. It was a foundation. I rented a tiny room in a crowded Tokpar group of the Ciudad Asterisk in the Colonia Hercules, and every night I'd fall asleep to the sound of the trains, dreaming of the day I could afford a place with a door that locked from the inside and a window that opened to something other than a brick wall. That factory was my crucible. It burned away the boy from the rancho and forged the man I would become. I met Elena at a kermesse for the feast of the Virgin of Guadalupe. She was serving buñuelos, and her laugh was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. It cut through the noise of the crowd, through the weariness in my bones. She had eyes that saw right through the grease and grime on my clothes, and saw the man underneath. She didn't care that I came from nothing. She saw the future I was trying to build. We courted for a year, walking through the Jardins Zanella on Sunday afternoons, sharing a single ice cream cone, because it was all we could afford. Marrying her was the best decision of my life. She was my partner, my asterisk compañera de vida. She turned my tiny, rented room into a home, and my meager salary into a shared dream. With her, the factory noise faded into the background. My days were defined by the hiss of the welding torch and the clang of metal. For over 40 years, I was a welder. I took pride in my work, in a clean, strong seam that would hold for a lifetime. My co-workers knew me as a man of few words, one who let his work speak for him. The long hours, the double shifts, the burns on my arms, they were all part of the deal. They were the price for a better life. I would come home, exhausted, smelling of burned metal, and Elena would be waiting with a hot plate of food. She would listen to my silent complaints, understanding the toll the job took without me having to say a word. She was the reason I could go back day after day. I wasn't just welding steel. I was building a future for us, piece by painful piece. After a few years of saving every peso we could, we bought a small house. It was just 2 rooms and a dusty patch of land in a new colonia on the edge of the city. But it was ours. We spent every weekend working on it. I built the shelves, fixed the leaky roof, and laid the tile in the kitchen myself. Elena painted the walls a cheerful yellow and planted a small garden in the back with cilantro, tomatoes, and a lime tree that eventually grew to give us shade. That house wasn't just a structure of brick and mortar. It was the physical manifestation of our love and our effort. It was where we would bring our son home, the nest we had built with calloused hands and unwavering hope. Every corner held a memory, a testament to our shared struggle and our shared joy. The day Marco was born, everything changed. I held him in my arms, so small, so fragile, and I felt a love so fierce it terrified me. All the sacrifices, all the burns and the aching muscles, they all suddenly had a purpose, a name, and a face. His face. I looked at his tiny, perfect hands, and I made a silent promise to him and to God. I promised that those hands would never know the rough, scarring work of a factory. They would hold pens and books, not welding torches. He would have the education I never got. He would stand on my shoulders and reach for a life I could only dream of. From that moment on, my life was no longer my own. It was an investment in his. I remember his 5th birthday like it was yesterday. All he wanted was a bicycle, a red one he had seen in the window of a downtown store. It cost a fortune, more than I could spare from my regular pay. So for 2 months, I took on side jobs. After my long shifts at the factory, I would go to another, smaller workshop and do extra welding. Off the books. I came home long after Elena and little Marco were asleep. I was bone-tired, running on nothing but coffee and determination. But when I saw the look on his face on his birthday morning, the pure, unadulterated joy as he saw that shiny red bicycle, every ounce of exhaustion vanished. That feeling, the feeling of giving my son something I never had, was worth more than any amount of rest or money. One evening, as Marco was doing his homework at the kitchen table, Elena sat beside me, her expression worried. "Arturo," she said quietly, "is it enough? Will we be able to give him what he needs?" I took her hand, the hand that had worked just as hard as mine to keep our home together. "Don't you worry, vieja," I told her, my voice full of a conviction I had to believe in. "Our Marco, our Mijo, he is going to university. He will wear a fine suit, not these dirty overalls. He will use his mind, not break his back like I do. This I promise you." That promise became my guiding star, the mission that fueled me through the longest shifts and the most difficult years. It was a promise I made to her, but also to myself. That's when the secret began. Some of the side jobs I took were more specialized. I had a knack for artistic ironwork, times herreria artistica. I started making custom gates and window guards for the new, fancy houses being built in developments like Juriquilla. The wealthy clients paid well, and they always paid in cash. It was a significant amount of money, far more than a factory worker was supposed to have. Elena and I decided to keep it separate, a secret fund. It wasn't for us. It was for Marco's university, for his future. We hid the cash in an old coffee can in the back of the closet. It was our secret weapon, the hidden engine that would power our son's dreams. Nobody knew about it. It was our sacrifice, our private conspiracy of love. I can still see him as a teenager, hunched over his textbooks late at night, struggling with algebra or chemistry. I couldn't help him with the equations. My formal education stopped at secondaria. I felt a pang of uselessness, of inadequacy. But I could do other things. I would get up and make him a cup of hot chocolate, or just sit in the chair across from him, reading the newspaper, staying awake with him in solidarity. I wanted him to know he wasn't alone in his struggle. My presence was all I could offer. Seeing him work so hard filled me with an immense pride, but also a quiet sadness, a recognition of the distance that his education was creating between his world and mine, a distance I was actively, lovingly building. When the time came for university, the cost was staggering. His business degree from the Universidad Autónoma de Querétaro felt like it cost 1,000,000 pesos. We pulled out the coffee can, our secret savings, and it still wasn't enough. Without a second thought, Elena sold the few pieces of gold jewelry she had, her wedding gift from her mother. I sold our old, reliable Tsiru, the car we had saved for years to buy, the car that held memories of family trips to Tequisquiapan. We handed all of it over for his tuition and books, stripping ourselves bare for his benefit. We never considered it a sacrifice. It was an investment. It was the fulfillment of our promise. We were happy to do it, happy to give him the key to a door that had always been locked for us. I'll never forget the day I bought him his first real suit. He needed it for his university interviews. We went to a department store downtown, a place I had only ever walked past. The suit he picked out cost nearly a full month of my salary from the factory. I paid for it in cash, my hand trembling slightly as I counted out the worn bills. When he tried it on, he looked like a different person. He was no longer my little boy. He was a man, a professional. He stood taller, his shoulders broader. I saw in him a glimpse of the future we had worked so hard to build. "We did it, Elena," I whispered to myself as we walked out of the store. "We did it." That image of him, so full of potential, is burned into my memory. Then the world tilted. Elena got sick. The word cancer entered our home and filled every corner with a cold, silent fear. Our life, once focused on the future, shrank to the present moment, to hospital visits, to the smell of antiseptic, to the beeping of machines. The money we had, the pension I was contributing to, suddenly felt so fragile, so insufficient. All the years of hard work seemed to fade in the face of this new, unbeatable enemy. I watched the love of my life, the strong, vibrant woman who was the bedrock of my world, slowly weaken. My strength meant nothing. My calloused hands couldn't fix this. I felt a helplessness that was more profound than any poverty I had ever known. In her last days, her hand felt so small in mine. The house was quiet, except for the sound of our breathing. She pulled me close one afternoon, her voice a fragile whisper. "Arturo," she said, promise me you'll take care of yourself. Don't be alone." Then she looked at me with an intensity that I can still feel. "And our Marco, make sure he never forgets where he comes from. Make sure he remembers the feel of this house, the taste of our food, the love that built him." I promised. I promised her everything. It was the last promise I ever made to her, a sacred oath sworn over a lifetime of shared love and sacrifice. A promise I thought I was honoring, every single day. After she was gone, the house became a hollow, echoing place. Her scent faded from the pillows. Her laughter was gone from the kitchen. The silence was a physical weight. Marco was married by then, to Sophia, a woman who always looked at our simple home with a kind of polite disdain. The visits became shorter, more infrequent. The phone calls became duties rather than conversations. "We're busy, Apa. The kids have a party." The excuses were always gentle, but they were like tiny, sharp stones, slowly building a wall between us. The loneliness I felt was a cold, creeping fog, seeping into the cracks of the life Elena and I had built, a life that now felt like it was only occupied by me. My day settled into a quiet, predictable rhythm. A walk to the market for vegetables, a stop at the church to light a candle for Elena, an hour spent on a bench in the plaza, watching the world go by. I lived simply, on my pension. The secret money, the fruit of my artistic ironwork, I had converted over the years into something more permanent, more secure. It remained hidden, untouched. In my mind, it was no longer just for Marco's future. It was his true inheritance. It was the final, grand gift from his mother and me, a testament to a lifetime of love and labor. It was a secret he was meant to discover only after I was gone, a final chapter that would reveal the true depth of our sacrifice. A secret he has now proven, with his cruelty, that he was never worthy of knowing. The betrayal didn't happen in that one phone call, with those cruel words that still echo in my head. No, that was just the final shove off a cliff I'd been slowly pushed towards for years. The ground had been eroding under my feet since Elena left this world. In the beginning, right after she passed, Marco was there. He'd call every day, visit on Sundays. But then he married Sophia. She was a woman from a different world, one with manicured nails and a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. From the very first day she stepped into my house, I could feel her judgment. She looked at Elena's old furniture, the worn but clean tiles, the pictures on the wall, as if they were artifacts from a forgotten, slightly embarrassing museum. Her silence was louder than any criticism. It started with the Sunday meals. For years, even after Marco was grown, our house was the center of the family on Sundays. The smell of Elena's mole, or barbacoa, would fill the street. After she was gone, I tried to keep the tradition alive. But soon, the excuses began. "Appa, we're swamped this weekend." Or, "Sophia wants to host at our place, it's bigger, more comfortable for the kids." My little house, the one I built with my own hands, was no longer good enough. Slowly, the Sunday gatherings at my table faded, until the silence of the empty chairs became the new tradition. I was being gently but firmly moved from the center of the family to the distant, inconvenient edge. Going to their house felt like visiting strangers. They lived in one of those new, gated communities, a place called Zibata, where all the houses looked the same and there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere. It was cold, sterile. Sophia would greet me with a kiss on the cheek that felt like a formality, a duty. "Don Arturo," she'd say, never suegro or anything warm. She'd offer me a drink and then get busy with other things, leaving me to sit on a couch that was more for looking at than for sitting on. Marco, my own son, would be distracted, on his phone, talking about business deals and investments, a language I didn't speak. I was a guest in my son's life, and a not particularly welcome one at that. I remember one dinner party they had. It was for one of Marco's business partners. I was invited, I think, so they could show how they still cared for the old man. They sat me at the far end of the long, glass table. The conversation flowed around me, a river of talk about stock markets, trips to Europe, and the price of land in San Miguel de Allende. I tried to join in once, to tell a story about the factory, but the words died in my throat. Everyone just smiled politely, and then turned back to their own world. I sat there, invisible, eating food I couldn't taste, just a piece of old furniture in a room full of shiny new things. That night, I understood I didn't belong in their new life. I was a relic of the old one they were trying so hard to leave behind. My grandchildren, Mateo and Valentina, were my last connection. When they were little, they'd run to me, yelling, "Abuelo!" and climb all over me. I was their favorite plaything. But as they got older, Sophia started to build a wall. "Careful, Mateo, your grandpa's back hurts." "Valentina, don't shout, you'll give Abuelo a headache." She wasn't protecting me. She was teaching them to see me as fragile, as a problem, as someone to be handled with caution. The spontaneous hugs stopped. They started to look at me with a kind of hesitant pity, the same look their mother had. She was poisoning my well of joy, drop by drop, and I was powerless to stop it. The phone calls became a weekly ritual of emptiness. Marco would call every Tuesday morning, like clockwork. "Appa, how's everything? Need anything?" he'd ask. His voice rushed. "I'm fine, mijo." "How are the kids?" I'd reply, hungry for a real conversation. "They're good. Busy with school." "Okay, Appa, I have to run into a meeting. Talk to you next week. Take care." Click. It wasn't a conversation. It was a checklist. Call Dad. Check. The man I taught to ride a bike, the boy I sat with while he did his homework, was now just an item on a to-do list. The warmth was gone, replaced by a cold, efficient sense of duty that felt more insulting than outright neglect. Then came the forgotten birthdays. The first year, they brought a small cake from Costco and stayed for an hour. The second year, Marco came alone, with a gift card for a department store, and stayed for 20 minutes. The third year, I got a phone call. "Happy birthday, Appa! We're so sorry. The kids have a soccer tournament. We can't make it." This past year, my 80th birthday, I received a text message at noon. "HBD Dad. Hope you have a great day. HBD." Not even the full words. I sat at my kitchen table, the one Elena and I shared for 50 years, and ate a piece of pan dulce alone. I had become an acronym, a brief, digital afterthought in the life of the son I gave everything to. The money requests were subtle at first, masked as emergencies. "Appa, Sophia's car needs a new transmission. We're a little short this month. Could you help us out with 5,000 pesos? I'll pay you back." He never did. Then it was, "Dad, we want to enroll Mateo in a better school, but the registration fee is steep." I always gave it. I saw it as my duty, as helping my family. I was the old tree, and it was natural for the young branches to take what they needed from me. I was too blind, too full of a father's stupid, unconditional love, to see that they weren't just taking what they needed. They were just taking. The tree was being stripped bare, and I was letting it happen. Oh, how I missed Elena in those moments. She would have seen it. She had a sixth sense for insincerity. She could spot a liar from a mile away. I can hear her voice in my head, sharp but loving. "Arturo, wake up," she would have said. "Open your eyes. Your son is a good man, but that woman is filling his head with ambition and shame. She is ashamed of you, of us, of where he comes from. Don't let her erase our life's work." But Elena was gone, and her voice was just a memory. I was alone, navigating this new, cold world without my compass, without my shield. I was an old soldier fighting a new kind of war, and I was losing badly. The final proof came one afternoon when I dropped by their house to leave some limes from my tree. I walked up the driveway and heard Sophia's voice through the open kitchen window. She was on the phone, laughing with a friend. "Oh my God, you have no idea," she said. "We have to go see him every other week. It's such a chore. The house smells like old people, and he just tells the same stories over and over. Marco feels obligated, you know. But honestly, it's like, just move into a home already and let us live our lives." I froze. My heart, the one I took medicine for, felt like it had been squeezed by a giant icy hand. I quietly put the bag of limes on the ground, turned around and walked away before she could see me. A chore. I was a chore. After that, I understood why I never saw the grandchildren anymore. The excuses were always so plausible. Piano lessons, birthday parties, a school project. But the truth was simpler. They were being kept from me. I saw them once at the Antia shopping mall with Sophia. I was across the food court. Our eyes met. I smiled, ready to wave, to walk over. But Sophia grabbed both their hands, turned them abruptly, and hurried them into a store, pretending she hadn't seen me. My own grandchildren, whisked away from me like I was a danger, a contamination. The shame of that moment burned in my gut. I wasn't just being neglected. I was being actively hidden, erased. I made one last, desperate attempt. Christmas was coming, Noche Buena. For Elena, it was the most sacred night of the year, a night for family. I called Marco. "Micho," I said, my voice sounding weak even to my own ears. "I'm going to make some tamales, your mother's recipe. Why don't you all come over for dinner, like we used to?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Appa," he finally said, the hesitation thick in his voice. "That sounds nice, but Sophia's parents are having their big annual party. All their friends will be there. It's kind of a big deal. We have to go, you understand." I understood perfectly. My tradition was a relic. Theirs was the future. That Christmas Eve, I sat alone with a plate of cold tamales, the silence of the house a deafening roar. That's when I started noticing the pictures on his social media, which Valentina had shown me how to use on my old tablet. There they were, a happy, perfect family. Pictures from their trip to the beach in Holbox. Pictures from a fancy restaurant celebrating Sophia's birthday. Pictures of the kids opening dozens of presents on Christmas morning, the morning after they were too busy to see their grandfather. I scrolled through image after image of their smiling faces, a life I was completely excluded from. I wasn't in a single photo. It was as if I didn't exist. I was the secret they kept, the embarrassing old root from which their shiny new tree had grown. I think back to a time I tried to give Mateo a gift. I had spent weeks carving a small wooden truck, a Tarbolero, just like the one my own father had made for me. It was simple, made of wood and love. I was so proud of it. I gave it to him at their house. He looked at it, confused. Sophia swooped in and took it from his hands. "Oh, Arturo, how—" "Traditional," she said, her smile as thin as a razor blade. "Thank you. We'll put it somewhere very safe so it doesn't get broken." I knew what safe meant. It meant the trash, or a dusty box in the back of a closet. She wasn't just rejecting the toy. She was rejecting me, my history, my hands, everything I came from. The last time I tried to see them without an invitation was my final lesson in humiliation. It was a Saturday afternoon, and a wave of loneliness so strong washed over me that I couldn't bear it. I just wanted to see my grandchildren's faces for 5 minutes. I drove my old Datsun to their gated community and walked to their door. I rang the bell. Sophia answered, her face instantly tightening into a mask of pure annoyance. "Arturo," she said, not even trying to hide it. "You should have called first. We're just on our way out." I could hear the sound of a soccer game on the TV behind her. They weren't going anywhere. I was the one who was being sent away. I just nodded, turned around and walked back to my car, my dignity in tatters. This abandonment wasn't a sudden earthquake. It was a slow poisoning, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It was the unanswered text message. The anniversary of Elena's death that they forgot. The way Marco would look at his watch when I was talking. The polite but firm way Sophia would end a visit. Each one, on its own, was a small thing. A misunderstanding. A busy schedule. Life. But added together, they formed a mountain of neglect that crushed me, that told me in a language clearer than words, that my time was over, that my role was finished. They were just waiting for me to fade away. I finally saw the truth with a clarity that was both terrifying and, in a strange way, liberating. I was no longer a father, a grandfather, the patriarch. I was a burden. I was a line item in their budget of time and emotion, and they had decided the cost was too high. The love I had invested in my son, my entire life's work, had been overwritten by a new program, a new ambition that had no space for an old man and his memories. My son didn't just grow up and leave the nest. He had turned around and set the nest on fire with me still inside it. So when he told me on the phone that he took the money that he needed it and I didn't, it wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. He hadn't just stolen my pension. He had simply cashed out the account of a man he already considered dead. The financial betrayal was merely the tombstone on the grave of a love that had been buried long ago. He had been abandoning me for years, piece by piece. Taking the money was just his way of making it official, of finally, mercifully, cutting the last thread. But what my son, in his modern, educated arrogance, never understood is that a man is more than what you see on the surface. He saw an old man in a small house, living on a pension. He saw weakness. He saw an ending. He never bothered to look at the foundations of that house, at the calluses on my hands, or at the secrets a man can carry for a lifetime. He thought he was taking the last few crumbs from a poor old man's table. He was a fool. He was so busy looking down on me that he never thought to look beneath his own feet, at the ground I had prepared for him, a ground he has now proven himself unworthy to stand on. My life's greatest secret wasn't born of mistrust, but of the deepest love a father can have, a love my son was too blind to see and too greedy to deserve. It all goes back to my other life, the one away from the noise and grime of the factory, my asterisk Heroria Artistica. It was more than a side job. Welding at the factory was work. Shaping iron into leaves and flowers was my soul speaking. For the rich folks building their mansions in Juriquilla and Balvanera, I wasn't just a welder. I was an artist. They wanted gates that looked like they belonged to a Spanish hacienda, window guards as delicate as lace. They paid for beauty, for uniqueness, and they always paid in cash. Crisp bills, handed over with a respectful nod. That money felt different. It didn't smell of sweat and survival like my factory wages. It smelled of respect. It was the proof that my hands could create more than just strong seams. They could create art. Elena and I made a pact. This money, the money from the iron flowers, was not for us. It was not for bills or for food. It was sacred. "This is Marco's future, Arturo," she would say as I counted the bills on our kitchen table. "But he must never know about it. Not until we are gone." Her reasoning was as solid as the iron I worked with. She believed, and I agreed, that knowing about a hidden fortune would poison his ambition. It would make him soft. We wanted him to build his own life, to learn the value of his own effort. We wanted him to struggle a little, to feel the satisfaction of earning his own success. The secret money was his safety net, not his hammock. It was a gift for the man he was supposed to become, not a crutch for the boy he was. So, for over 30 years, I became a ghost. Once a month, I would take a portion of that cash and travel to the Centro Histórico. There was an old jeweler there, in a tiny shop near the Plaza de Armas, a man who dealt in gold. He knew me only as Arturo, the quiet man who bought centenarios, one at a time, sometimes two. I would hand him a stack of worn pesos, and he would give me a heavy, shining gold coin, a 50-peso centenario, with the Angel of Independence on one side, and an eagle devouring a serpent on the other. Each coin was a month of evenings spent over a hot forge, a month of secret labor, a monument to my love for my son. I would take the coin home and wrap it in a soft cloth, adding it to the growing collection. Over the decades, the collection grew. It was a slow and patient process. When I finally stopped my side work, my eyes too old for the fine details, I had 50 of them, 50 golden centenarios. Today, each one of those coins is worth a small fortune, around 50,000 pesos. Altogether, they are worth 2.5 million pesos. They are hidden where no one would ever think to look. Not in a safe, not in a bank. They are resting at the bottom of an old clay asterisk cantaro, the kind used for water, filled with dried beans and buried beneath a loose floor tile under Elena's old sewing machine. A peasant's safe. My son, with his talk of stocks and investments, would have laughed at it. He never realized that the old ways are sometimes the safest. But the gold was only half of the secret. In the early 70s, with a large payment I received for the gates of a politician's entire estate, I did something else. I bought land. A friend from the factory told me about a man selling his cogito rights to a useless piece of land far outside the city, on the road to San Miguel de Allende. It was nothing but cactus and rocks, a place where only snakes and scorpions lived. I paid next to nothing for it. 2 hectares of dusty, forgotten earth. Elena thought I was crazy. "What are you going to do with that wasteland, Arturo?" she asked. "We're going to let it sleep, Homilla," I told her. "We're going to let it dream." It was a gamble, a seed planted in the desert. And for 40 years it slept. But the city of Querétaro did not. It grew, stretching its arms out in every direction. The wasteland I bought for a handful of pesos slowly found itself surrounded. First by a new highway, then by industrial parks, and now by the new, exclusive residential developments that are popping up everywhere. That forgotten patch of dirt, my locura, is now considered prime commercial real estate. A few months ago, a developer, a young man in a fancy suit just like my son's, found me. He came to my door with maps and plans. He offered me 8 million pesos for my 2 hectares. I told him I wasn't ready to sell. He left his card telling me the offer stood and would likely go up. So you see, my son did not rob a poor old man. He robbed a man who was quietly sitting on a fortune of more than 10 million pesos. He stole 80,000 pesos, a pitiful handful of change from a father who had built a kingdom for him in secret. The irony is so bitter it burns my throat. My son, the university-educated businessman, the one who looks down on my simple ways, was blind to the single greatest financial asset in his own family's history. He was so preoccupied with his image, with his new life, that he couldn't see the real value that was right there, hidden behind a worn-out facade of old age and poverty. He saw a dry, useless well, not knowing it was connected to a deep and hidden spring. This fortune was my final promise to Elena. It was supposed to be my last gift to Marco, revealed in a letter after my death. I imagined his shock, his gratitude. I imagined him finally understanding the depth of our sacrifice, the secret weight his mother and I had carried for him. The letter would have explained everything: the side work, the gold, the land. It was meant to be a final embrace from the grave, a testament that our love for him was bigger than he could ever have imagined. It was supposed to secure his future, and the future of his children. It was a legacy of love, but a legacy is only for those who honor the past, and my son has proven he is a man with no honor. In the crushing silence of my house after that phone call, after the insult of his words, something inside me shifted. The profound, heartbreaking grief began to cool and harden, like molten steel plunged into water. It became something else. It became resolve. I looked at the faded photograph of Elena on my nightstand, her gentle smile, a beacon in my darkness. What would she want? She would not want me to crumble. She would not want me to let our life's work be desecrated. She would want me to fight, not with anger and shouting, but with the quiet dignity she always embodied. The son we had saved for was gone. The man who wore his face was a stranger, a thief, and a thief must be met with justice. The purpose of the secret had now changed. It was no longer a gift for my son. It was now a tool for my salvation. It was the weapon I never knew I had forged. My son thought he held all the cards. He had youth, strength, and my own money in his pocket. He saw me as powerless, a relic waiting to be swept away. But power comes in many forms. My power was silent, patient, and buried under the floorboards. He had underestimated me. He had underestimated the resilience of an old man who had survived a life of hard labor, who had buried his wife, and who had learned that true strength isn't about how loud you shout, but about how long you can endure. I remember something Elena used to say when we saw someone being boastful or arrogant. El pez por la boca muere, she'd whisper to me. A fish dies by its own mouth. My son, with his cruel, boastful words on the phone, had done just that. He had revealed his true nature. He had shown me the rot in his soul. He thought he was closing a chapter, ending his obligation to me, but all he did was open a new one, a chapter I would now write. A chapter in which the old, silent man he dismissed would finally find his voice, not in words, but in action. He thought he had the final say. He was wrong. It is a strange feeling to be a ghost in your own family, to be seen as a relic, a piece of furniture. They looked at me and saw my gray hair, my wrinkled skin, my slow walk. They forgot that these hands once balanced on steel beams high above the ground, that these eyes could spot a flawed weld from 10 meters away, that this mind, though old, was still sharp. They forgot that the wisdom of a long life is a kind of wealth they couldn't possibly understand. My son saw an old man who needed 300 pesos for his heart medicine. He never once considered that this same old man had the resources to buy the entire pharmacy. The greatest irony is that Marco fancies himself a great businessman. He talks of vision, of seeing opportunities. Yet he lived his whole life next to a treasure map and never once thought to read it. He was so focused on the shiny, superficial world he had built for himself that he became blind to the solid, earthy reality of where he came from. I, the simple welder, the man who never finished high school, had made a better long-term investment than he could ever dream of. I had invested in gold and in dirt, the two things that have held value since the beginning of time. He had invested in appearances, and they are as fleeting as the morning mist. My mind was clear. The path forward was no longer shrouded in the fog of grief. It was a straight, hard road, but I could see the end. The plan began to form, piece by piece. Justice would not be found in pleading phone calls or angry confrontations. It would be found in the cold and partial halls of a courtroom. It would be funded by the very legacy my son had just spat upon. I knew what I had to do first. I would go to the *Cantaro* buried beneath the floor. I would take out just one of those 50 gold coins. One piece of my secret life would be used to bring his public betrayal into the light. That single gold coin would be the key. It would unlock a door my son never knew existed. With it, I wouldn't just hire a lawyer. I would hire the best lawyer in Querétaro. I would not come to this fight as a victim, but as a plaintiff. I would not be the weak, abandoned father. I would be Arturo, a man of means, a man of substance, a man demanding that what was stolen be returned. My son wanted to treat me like a business transaction, an inheritance to be collected early. Fine. I will show him what a real business transaction looks like, with lawyers and contracts and consequences. He thought he had taken my last shred of dignity. He was about to find out that my dignity was never in that bank account. It was forged in fire, and it is unbreakable. The day after that phone call, after the pharmacy, after the world had collapsed, I woke up to a silence in the house that was different. It wasn't the lonely silence of grief. It was the quiet of a new, cold clarity. I sat at the kitchen table, the weak morning light filtering through the window, and I looked at the old photograph of Elena we kept on the wall. Her smile, always so full of life, seemed to be telling me something. Arturo, I could almost hear her say, don't you dare let him erase us. And in that moment, I knew revenge was a fool's game. It burns the person who holds it. No, this wasn't about revenge. This was about honor. It was about protecting the 50 years of love and labor that she and I had built. A fortress that my son was trying to tear down stone by stone. The legacy we built was not his to destroy. It was mine to defend. My first move was slow and deliberate. That afternoon, I went to the back room, where Elena's old Singer's sewing machine still sits, covered in a white sheet like a ghost. I knelt down, my old knees protesting, and felt for the loose floor tile I had set myself 40 years ago. I lifted it, the smell of dust and dry earth filling the air. There it was, the heavy clay asterisk cantero. I reached my hand inside, past the dried beans, and my fingers closed around the solid, heavy weight of a single centenario. Holding it in my palm, I felt the years of secret work, the heat of the forge, the weight of my promise to Elena. This coin was not a treasure anymore. It was a tool. The next day, I took a bus downtown, sold that one coin for more money than I had seen in years, and walked directly to the office of the best lawyer in Querétaro, a man known for being as tough as old leather. In his office, surrounded by leather-bound books that smelled of importance, I did not cry or plead my case like a poor, abandoned old man. I laid out the facts simply. I showed him the bank statements. I told him what my son had done, what he had said. I want to press charges, licenciado, I said, my voice steady. I want him to answer for the theft. Not to me, but to the law. The lawyer looked at me, surprised, I think, by my resolve. He probably expected a family dispute, a plea for mediation. But I was clear. There would be no family meeting, no tearful confrontation. My son treated this as a business transaction, so we would settle it like one, in a courtroom, where his excuses and his arrogance would mean nothing against the cold, hard proof of his crime. I would face him not as a father he could dismiss, but as a citizen he had wronged. But the lawsuit for the pension was just the beginning. It was the public part of my plan. The private part, the real justice, was yet to come. I instructed the lawyer to begin the process of liquidating everything. The developer who wanted my land was called. The other 49 gold coins were to be sold. I had him draw up a new will, one that was ironclad and absolute. In it, my son Marco is not mentioned. He is not disinherited with a single angry sentence. He is simply not there. He has been erased. The entirety of my fortune, the fruit of my secret life, the 10 million pesos that were supposed to be his legacy, will now go into a trust. It will be used to create the Fundación Elena, a charity to provide shelter, food, and legal help for elderly people in Querétaro who have been abandoned by their families. My son thought he was taking my future. He thought he was taking the last few pesos that would keep me alive. He was wrong. He only took the bait. My life, my real wealth, was never in that pension account. It was in the love I shared with my wife, in the sweat of my labor, and in the dignity of a life lived honestly. Now, that wealth will live on, not in the hands of one ungrateful son, but in the lives of hundreds of strangers who, like me, have been made to feel invisible. I have not lost anything. I have simply redirected my legacy to those who are worthy of it. I will live out my final years in peace, in this little house filled with Elena's memory, knowing that our life's work will serve a purpose greater than we ever could have imagined. That is a justice that no court can grant, and no thief can ever take away.